7 goals, fighter jets, fireworks, a halftime concert, more than 35,000 fans. Sounds like the perfect night. Well, no exactly. My MLS All-Star experience started at Romare Bearden Park. The only problem was that there was no event there. No fan zone, no music, no crowds. Nothing. The festival had already taken place several days earlier. So instead of starting the day inside a major soccer celebration, I started it in an empty park in Charlotte Uptown. Not exactly the beginning I expected. But the stadium was nearby, and the day was still young, so I headed toward the Blue Furia tailgate. The road took me past Truist Field, home of the Charlotte Knights, and then toward Bank of America Stadium. As I got closer, the city slowly began to feel like it was hosting a major event. More jerseys, more police, more security, and more people moving toward the stadium. But even in the Blue Furia tailgate, the crowd was still fairly small. There were a few tents, Charlotte FC flags, music, and groups of supporters waiting for the evening to begin. It was hot. The main crowd hadn't arrived yet, and waiting there for another couple of hours didn't make much sense. So I headed back toward the stadium. The area around Bank of America Stadium was slowly filling up. Supporters were arriving, drums were getting louder, and the atmosphere was finally beginning to match the size of the event. It wasn't chaotic or overwhelming. It felt more like a large summer festival built around a soccer game. And that is probably the best way to understand the MLS All-Star Game. This is not a serious competition. It is entertainment first and football second. At the entrance, fans received white MLS All-Star shirts. Inside, people were eating, drinking, meeting mascots, taking photos, and walking around the stadium before kickoff. And, as usual at major American stadiums, the concession prices were completely ridiculous. But at this point, that is almost part of the experience. The main reason I wanted to attend this match was Leo Messi. Opportunities to see him play are becoming limited, and I thought this might be one of them. But Messi wasn't there. Rodrigo de Paul was also absent. Considering their schedule and the need for recovery, the decision was understandable. But for many people in the stadium, Messi was probably the player they wanted to see most. Even if he wasn't going to play, simply appearing in front of the crowd would have meant something. Instead, the biggest name of the evening became Heung-min. Before kickoff, the organizers delivered the full American sports experience. Fireworks, pyrotechnics, player introductions, and 2 military aircraft flying over the stadium. It was loud, dramatic, and visually impressive. And honestly, the pre-game show was one of the strongest parts of the evening. MLS All-Star faced the Liga MX All-Stars. Liga MX scored first, but Son quickly changed the game. He scored twice before the first hydration break and then left the field after playing only around 25 minutes. That was enough. The crowd loved him. Every time he appeared on the screen, people reacted. After his goals, the stadium was chanting his name. Son was clearly the player the audience connected with most, and he was later named the match MVP. MLS eventually won 4-3. 7 goals sounds exciting, and there were some good combinations and entertaining moments. But this was still an exhibition game. Nobody wanted to make a dangerous tackle. Nobody played as if a result would define their season. The intensity was limited, and the teams made constant substitutions so that as many selected players as possible could appear. If this had been a competitive match, I probably would have called it disappointing. But for an All-Star game, it was fine. There were goals, recognizable players, and enough action to keep the crowd entertained. That is really all this type of match needs. At halftime, Ciara performed inside the stadium. Her music is not really my style, but the production was impressive. The stage, dancers, lighting, and overall presentation made it feel like a complete concert rather than a short stadium appearance. Again, this was not just about soccer. It was a full entertainment package. Thomas Müller appeared later in the match. He didn't produce any major moment, but I don't think proving anything was the goal. For many fans, simply seeing a player with his career and reputation was enough. Behind my section, the Blue Furia supporters kept singing and playing drums throughout the match. The tailgate had looked quiet earlier in the day, but inside the stadium, they helped create much of the atmosphere. The announced attendance was just over 35,000. That is a strong crowd, although Bank of America Stadium still had plenty of visible empty seats. And by the final whistle, many people had already left. So, was the MLS All-Star Game worth it? As a serious sporting event, not really. There was no real pressure, no major rivalry, and very little competitive intensity. It was an exhibition match, but as a summer entertainment event, it worked. 7 goals, 2 goals from Son, Thomas Müller, fireworks, military aircraft, a halftime concert, and a large crowd spending the evening together in Charlotte uptown. Would I clear an entire day for another All-Star game? Probably only if a player like Messi was actually going to be there. But if the event was nearby, the ticket price was reasonable, and I had a free evening, I would go again. You just need to know what you are buying. This is not high-stakes football. It is a soccer-themed show, and judged it as a show, it was a solid night. This was another step in my journey through American sports and sports culture. There is still a lot for me to see, understand, and experience. So I'll see you in the next video.